Hello, welcome to another edition of Jazz Smack. Today we are going to discuss the NBA tanking, the NBA fining the Utah Jazz, and how the NBA could have handled this, particularly Adam Silver, how he could have handled it much better. We're also going to talk about the rebuild process of the Utah Jazz and how the Jazz should be immensely better this coming season. So let's get into it.
Jazz Smack, NBA and Utah Jazz basketball.
So the situation with the Jazz and being fined by the NBA a substantial amount of money. I find this situation from a Utah Jazz standpoint particularly appalling. It's offensive in every conceivable way. I mean, I honestly can't believe the NBA handled this in such a manner. So let's take a look at this as a whole. Why are the Utah Jazz purposely losing games? Well, they're purposely losing games in order to better their chances of getting a high draft pick. The Jazz need a high draft pick. They need a top-tier talent. They're still in search of that. And the NBA has cultivated a system where the more games you lose, the better chance you have of being lucky in the lottery and ending with a higher draft pick. So that's the situation. That's how the NBA has been operated for a number of years, many years. This is how it's been done. And not only that, but all the teams have witnessed some franchises being richly rewarded for losing games, purposely losing games, and manipulating the system by doing so. And the number one person that comes to mind when we talk about this, the number one franchise, is certainly the San Antonio Spurs. We've all seen it. We all know it. We all remember it. We all remember how Greg Popovich purposely lost games in order to give himself the best chance possible to draft Tim Duncan. And that certainly worked out for the San Antonio Spurs and Greg Popovich. They were richly rewarded for that. Now, it wasn't just Tim Duncan. They had Manu, they had Tony Parker, they had other players around those guys that were very good. But certainly the addition of Tim Duncan through that number one pick allowed them to win those titles. They were rewarded for it. And that's not the only time it's happened. Popovich also tanked to get Wemby, and that worked out. So we see situations like that, and we see the outcomes. And do you really fault other NBA franchises, the owners, the management, from going down a similar path to try and increase their chances of getting a high pick by losing games purposely? I don't see how anybody can fault those other franchises for doing that. I mean, the San Antonio Spurs did not start this. I mean, it's known that if you go back to the early 80s and what the Houston Rockets did, and this predates the NBA draft lottery. It used to be you just went in order of worst record, they got the top pick. So the Houston Rockets, in successive NBA drafts, they got Ralph Sampson, and then the next draft, they got Olajuwon. The old Twin Towers. And certainly drafting, now it didn't work out with Ralph Sampson. His knees didn't hold up. But Olajuwon, certainly, he was the primary player. He was by far the best player. He's one of the best players in the NBA. He was the best player on those Houston Rockets title teams under Rudy T, that Rudy Tomjanovich coached. But without getting that top pick, by losing games, they don't have Olajuwon. Some other franchise has Olajuwon. So that certainly worked out for Houston too. And then the NBA, because of that, they instituted the NBA lottery where the worst record doesn't automatically get the number one pick, but you're in a lottery system, but it's still heavily weighted toward your record. So there's still incentive to lose games. It's just gotten worse over time with more and more teams trying to lose games, following the model that Greg Popovich kind of set for the entire NBA, the strategy that worked. Now, is there a single person that's been more lauded in the NBA over the last 25 years than Greg Popovich? I can't think of one. I find Greg Popovich particularly revolting. I think he's sloppy, he's mean, belligerent, perpetually angry. I detest that guy. I don't like him at all. I can't say any good things about him. It's just, ugh. He's gross, dude. But that guy was celebrated by the NBA, and he made a mockery of the game by purposely throwing games to lose, to get a better draft position. He did that. He was celebrated for doing that. And now you're going to come along and find the Utah Jazz for going down a similar path? Well, that's ridiculous. Adam Silver and David Stern are the guys who created this system. They're the ones that could have changed it long ago, and they didn't. Now, David Stern, obviously, he's passed on. He's no longer with us. But he and Adam Silver are the two guys most capable of instituting something that's better and addressing this in a meaningful way. And what Adam Silver should have done in this situation, instead of going out and issuing these massive fines, what he should have done is he should have held a press conference and he should have taken personal responsibility for the situation that exists today. Here's what he should have done. He should have just said, I want to apologize to the fans, to the franchises, the players, the coaches, the owners, the NBA personnel in each of the franchise personnel that manages these franchises. I want to apologize to all of them for cultivating a system where teams are incentivized to lose games by getting a better draft position. And this offseason, we are going to fix this. This won't be the case moving forward. We are going to address this, and we are going to permanently fix this problem. So there will be no more incentives for teams to lose, and the game is going to be much better. The regular seasons will be much better, where there will be not be any incentives to lose games. Everybody's going to be trying to win. That's what he needed to do. But he didn't do that. Unfortunately, he didn't do that. He took the exact wrong approach and he started fining, which, did any of us really expect Adam Silver to take responsibility for the situation that we find ourselves in with the NBA? No, I didn't expect that. I doubt if any of you expected that either, because that hasn't been the history. Going to blame the problems on franchises. Well, guess what, Adam? You could have changed this years ago, and you didn't. You just pushed it aside. Like a whole bunch of other issues that are going on in the NBA right now. You could have addressed it yourself, and you could have fixed it. With some luck, this actually does get fixed this offseason, and none of us ever have to sit through this again where there are incentives to lose games. because I think that we would all be better off if the basketball were deemed legitimate, the outcomes were deemed legitimate. Now, this is one problem of many problems that the NBA currently has, and with some luck, all of those problems, many of them are addressed this offseason as they're addressing this one. We'll see. We will see. I mean, by the start of next season, we'll know what's been changed and what stays the same. But we'll see. I hope there are no more incentives to lose games next season. Now, let's get on to the Jazz rebuild. Now, since the end of the trade deadline, there's been a lot of talk since the Jazz made the trade for Jaren Jackson Jr. that the Jazz rebuild is now over. That it's finished. Personally, I don't see it that way. I still see this as an ongoing process, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think this is an ongoing process still. I think the Jazz are in a situation where where the roster is obviously much better. With Jaren Jackson Jr., Walker coming back, the roster is obviously better. And with those two guys on the team next year, Walker and Jaren, the defense should certainly be improved. It must be improved. It must be substantially improved, but it should be improved. And so the Jazz certainly have an opportunity to make the playoffs next year. And I would say it's a disappointing year if they don't make the top 6. I think that with this roster, they have the ability to be in the top 6. They can just bypass the whole play-in and get into the top 6. They certainly are capable of that. What I still think, though, is I don't think they're in a situation where they can be, with the current roster, where they can be competitive, where they have a legitimate shot at winning a title with the current roster. I still think they need that top-end talent. I think that's the thing that they're missing. I still view Lowry as a number 3 guy on a legit title team. And I think that Jaren, at best case scenario, is equivalent of that, but I view him as below Lowry in the pecking order of where you stand on a title team. I at best case scenario, I view him as equivalent. And I don't view him as that. And I think it's Lowry, I think it's Jaren, and I think all the rest of the play, and then probably Walker and everybody else below that. Now, Ace is still a developing player. Nobody knows exactly where he's going to end up. But do I view Ace as a number 1 or number 2 guy on a title team at some point? I think that's a stretch. I think Ace can be a really important piece of a title team. But to say that he's a number 1 or number 2 guy on a title team, I don't think he's ever going to get to be a number 1 guy. And I have doubts that he's going to get to be a number 2 guy. I have high hopes for Ace. And certainly trying to judge a guy while he's in his rookie year is extraordinarily difficult. I mean, a lot can change. And I see some really good things from Ace. But that leadership quality of being a number 1 guy, I don't see that. And that's not anything against Ace at all, because I believe that Ace is his development is super important, and he's going to be in a super important piece if the Jazz are to get to a title contention. Ace has to be a big part of that. But that number 1 or number 2 guy, the Jazz have to hit a home run in this draft. Yes, they need to get fortunate in the lottery. There's no doubt. They need to get lucky, and then they need to hit a home run at that pick. Because they still need it. It just makes this process so much more realistic to be in true title contention if they can secure a top 10 NBA talent and hopefully a top 5 talent. And I don't see that on the roster right now. So we'll see what happens with this lottery and their draft pick. But boy, the games next year should be so much better than what we've seen the last 4 years. And we'll see how the defense improves. It has to improve. I mean, the Jazz could always take the approach, well, we might not have like that top 10 piece, but we can take the Detroit Pistons approach, the Detroit Pistons from like the Chauncey Billups, Rip Hamilton years, and we can do it collectively, and we can be a good defensive team, and then we can do it collectively and put us in a position where we can win a title that way. Now, that's not the typical way you win a title. That's the exception. That might be what the Jazz are shooting for at this point. And that might be their hope. But that's certainly the exception, rather than having that one really high-end talent, that standout guy. That Pistons team didn't have that. But that Pistons team was still good. But that's a more difficult pathway to get to a title, given the roster, in terms of hopes of actually getting a title. So we'll see what happens. The Jazz do need to get lucky in this lottery, though. So one of the things that goes back to this tanking thing, though, is another one of the problems that I think the NBA should try and address legitimately this offseason in the way that the NBA is actually operated. I mean, the NBA, these games are so much better when players play, when the good players play, and the number of missed games today compared to like decades past is just, it's just completely different. There are way too many games being missed by players these days. It's almost like the players don't even want to play like they did in decades past. And that's one of the complaints from retired players, the old school 80s and 90s guys that you hear talk about this, is like the players don't play anymore. And the fans can see that. The games are a lot better when you have like your best players playing, when they play together, when they're like a cohesive unit. It used to be that you could kind of count on your best players playing 82 games, and at the very least, if they didn't play 82 games, they certainly wanted to play 82 games. They tried to play 82 games. And now, that's completely different. Basically, almost no one plays 82 games anymore. I'm going to actually give you some stats here about the number of games that players play. And I'm going to give you the last 5 seasons, the stats from the last 5 seasons about the number of players who actually played 82 games. So for the 24-25 season, there were 11 players in the entire NBA that played 82 games. 11. In the 23-24 season, there were 17 players that played in all 82 games. In the 22-23 season, there were 10 players that played all 82 games. In 21-22, there were 5 players that played all 82 games. And then in the 2021 season, this was the season that was shortened by COVID, so there were only 72 games played, but 11 players played in the 72 games. So you contrast that, those are tiny, tiny numbers compared to the whole of the league. Now, a lot of those players are bench players, and they wouldn't play in all 82 games anyway, whether they're available to play or not. But still, you were talking about 5 players out of the entire roster of players throughout the entire league. That's wild. That is just crazy. So let's contrast this with some decades past. So let's say the mid-'80s to the mid-'90s. And in the mid-'80s to mid-'90s, you frequently had 40 plus players play in all 82 games. It's not even, it's a multiple of what players are playing today, of how many players are playing 82 games today. And this is one of the things that made those games much more compelling, is because you could, when you block out so much time to go to games, to attend games of these people that were attending games in person, And it takes, it's so many hours to attend game in person. Regardless of how many miles you live away from the arena, it's still, it's a massive time commitment for you, for your family. The time commitment is the biggest portion of this. Yes, there's great expense involved with this too, in terms of the outlay of money for tickets, concessions, parking, all of that. But the time commitment is the biggest factor here. When you show up or you block out time to watch a game on TV, and then you find out that there's all these injured players, that is just super frustrating. And the quality of the product, the NBA game, has certainly declined as a result of that. Now, it's declined for a number of reasons. We all know about the three-point shooting and the number of threes taken and all of that. But just simply players no longer playing is a big issue, an issue that really needs to be fundamentally addressed by the league. And we hope, at least I hope, that this is one of the things that the NBA looks at this offseason and finds a solution. Because the players need to want to play, the players need to play. You just can't have missed games. It's almost like the most desired lineups, those lineups very rarely ever play together, because each game there's one or more players that isn't playing that needs to play. It's multiple players each game that are missing games now. Seemingly, it's just night after night after night. It's wild how things have changed, how circumstances have changed in just, 20 years. It's really crazy. And this is another one of those things that goes back to tanking, where you don't want players sitting, your best players. Well, you don't want your best players sitting regardless of circumstances, because from a fan perspective, the games are just a lot better when the best players play. When your starters play and they play together, the outcome, the product is better. So let's see if Adam Silver also addresses this problem, because this certainly relates directly to the tanking. We want guys to play. We want the best product possible on the floor. Let's see what happens. So those are really the things that I want to address in this episode of Jazz Smack. The NBA finding the Utah Jazz is the main thing. It's just so frustrating to see that happen. I just can't even describe why, of all the steps that the NBA could have taken, starting to find the teams these ridiculous sums of money. And I know it relates to best sports betting and the legitimacy of that. And I agree with that. I don't sports bet. I don't even like sports betting. I wish the NBA wasn't affiliated with any of these companies or any of the franchises are affiliated with companies, or any of the players are affiliated with companies that are sports betting. I wish they would just, I don't like sports betting. But still, you have to have the legitimacy of the game. If you're going to have wagers on gambling, if Las Vegas is going to have sports books, there has to be some legitimacy to that product. We've seen all the players that have gotten in trouble with accusations of throwing games, whether it's in college or what happened with Beasley in the NBA and Porter in the NBA and whatnot. We've all seen that. This has been a problem for a long time, not only in basketball, but all the other sports too. But still, there has to be some legitimacy to the game. There has to be. It's imperative. There's legitimacy to the outcomes of these games. And the players need to play, and they need to play hard, and they need to try and win. And that should be the goal. From a league standpoint, how do you get that That has to be the desired outcome of any of these games. So anyway, we'll leave it at that. If it's nice where you are today, I'm expecting rain here shortly. So I'm going to get out. I'm going to hit the trail. I'm going to take a walk, and I encourage a walk/run. We'll see if I can get on the beach too. I encourage you all to do the same. There's no better cure for anything and everything than just getting out and getting some exercise in the outdoors. So before the rains start, I'm going to go and do that this afternoon. And I encourage you all to do the same if it's nice wherever you are. If it's 20 degrees and it's snowing, then you can just disregard whatever it is I'm telling you. But anyway, so we're going to call it that. We're going to call it the end of this edition. For those watching on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. You can also follow us on X at Jazz Smack, and we will talk to everybody later.